All right, Mental Health, Gender Norms, and Stigmas by myself, Jacob Lewis. So some definitions of terms before we get into the presentation. First one is perceived stigma, which is the stigma or fear of being shamed or discriminated against by another person. So it's what your perception is by another human. Societal norms or social norms, you can use either word, but it's something that is like the standard in society. And then a vignette, which is a brief description, account, story, or episode. So some background. Mental health is an arising issue in today's society. The CDC, or the Center for Disease Control, says that more than 50% of the population will be diagnosed with some mental health disorder by the time they become at least older and adult. And this doesn't even include the ones that aren't going to be diagnosed with a mental health issue. And then another big thing that I separated into mental health is the gender differences and the standards. In society, men and women are held into different accountabilities of some actions that they do and cannot do, and this comes with the societal norms that are already ingrained in our society. And because of these ingrained societal norms, this is where the stigmas come about. This is why we feel shame for doing actions that are outside of these norms. My research question for my study is, how do the different adolescent genders see divergently on mental health societal norms, and what stigmas could ensue from this? The objectives of my study was to research adolescent mental health within the males and the females, to find gender differences in societal norms surrounding mental health, to find gender differences in the mental health stigmas. The study is significant due to the fact that mental health is still a very contemporary topic that lacks research in this area. And mental health is looked at, but what about the effects of it, or why we have mental health issues even in the first place? So the first study I looked at was adolescent gender role identity and mental health, gender intensification revisited. This is by Priest, Lindbergh, and Hyde. This was an older study done in 2009. The method they conducted was they had the participants complete a number of questions via survey. And these were questions about their gender, their identity, the depressive symptoms, big life events. What they found was that what gender you are most surrounded by in your life is how you're gonna express yourself. And they encouraged for girls to take, or in society, it is encouraged for girls to take on more masculine traits than it was for boys to take on more feminine traits. And this helped me with my methods due to the fact that they used a survey and they looked at the gender role identity. The next was attitudes towards professional psychological help seeking in South Asian students. The role of stigma and gender. This was by Aurora, Metz, and Carlson. This was more recent, done in 2016. The method they conducted was they measured the perceived and personal stigmas of individuals, and they used different scaling instruments. They used one to measure perceived, they used one to measure personal, see how they'd react to help seeking in mental health. And what they found was personal stigma affected the way individuals go about seeking help for mental health, and the perceived stigma did not affect how they would go seek help. Being male was associated with increasingly negative attitudes towards professional psychological help. This helps my method based on the fact that they use different scaling instruments to measure perceived stigma, and the fact that they separated gender roles. So they found that males were held to more negative standards. My last source in this presentation is anxiety-specific mental health stigma and help seeking in adolescent males. This is by Clark, Hudson, and Hader. This was done very recent in 2020. The method they conducted was they used a vignette method that really inspired my methodology the most. And they used open response questions that ensued short stories. What they found was that males do not stigmatize clinical mental health, but this changes with normal levels of anxiety and they become more harsh towards each other. Basically what this means is that when a person has been diagnosed with a reason for mental health, individuals see like, okay, this is fine. But when a person is feeling maybe some specific emotions for a reason not identified yet, people become more harsh towards them. This study really inspired my methods the most based on the vignette method. They asked short stories about societal norms and asked for a response based on what the respondents said. So my methodology, I carried out descriptive research, which is characteristics, trends, and without a changing environment. I found that descriptive research best fits my research because mental health is such a complicated issue that you cannot dive deep into it without scientific tools, stuff like that. So descriptive research, just staying on the top layer with the characteristics best fits mine. And then I looked into the gender differences through a method that combines the 3 lit review sources that I talked about. How I carried out my methodology, I used a survey sent out to 2 different schools. It was about 53% males, 47% females. They were filled with concise vignettes, which I explained as short stories displaying the societal norm aspect. And then these vignette elicited responses of the perceived stigmas by the respondents. I asked this through, do you agree the action of the story is appropriate? And then after I asked the appropriateness of the question, I asked if this action in the vignette goes against what the respondent thinks its societal norms are. And I calculated this through a Likert scale of strongly disagree to strongly agree. So results. So here in my survey, I used 2 different characters. I used a male, Mark, and I used a female, Tessa. Mark has been feeling down lately for no clear reason. It is appropriate for him to feel this way. 1, strongly disagree, to 5, strongly agree. Instead of asking a question, I used a statement. So as you can see here, it is still strongly agree that he can feel down for no reason. Same with Tessa, they are quite similar results. But when you give a reason for why he felt this way, the strongly agree becomes way more significant. I explained how he's had a hard year due to the divorce of his parents, the death of his grandma, being isolated during COVID. And with giving these reasons, the data shifts far to the right with more agrees. Results part 3. I then asked a question about Mark and Tessa getting plastic surgery on their nose for no reason at all. And this is the aspect of, does this go against societal norms? Here we can see that for Mark, the data shifts to the right, which people agree that Mark getting plastic surgery goes against societal norms far more than Tessa getting plastic surgery goes against societal norms and the reason for the But again, if I get a reason for why Mark got plastic surgery on his nose, I said he has trouble breathing in his airways. The data shifts significantly to the left. Almost all the respondents disagree that this action goes against societal norms. I looked at as a whole for the percent of respondents that agree is appropriate for each character vignette to feel the way they feel in the story. The pink line is the females responding and the blue line is males. So while most of the responses are pretty similar, we can see that for pretty much the whole survey, females are always more at the top, which means that they are more accepting of what's going on in my vignettes. And then I also did a graph of the societal norm aspect. In this one, you want the graph to be more at the bottom, which I'll explain in my limitations. But again, you can see that the females are still more under the blue line, which means they're more accepting of what's going on in the situation, and it's going least against the societal norms. Another thing I did was I broke up each character question into males and females. So in the top right, we have Tessa questions. The orange line is going to be females answering about the appropriateness of Tessa's actions. The blue line is going to be males answering about the appropriateness of Tessa's actions. Again, for every question in Tessa, females are more accepting of what's going on. And for Mark's questions, females are more accepting of what's going on for every question except for plastic surgery on Mark's nose. The last part of my results is breaking it down into every different type of story that's going on. I'm really seeing females about Tessa, females about Mark, or males about Mark, males about Tessa. And if you look closely at the data, females are going to be represented by yellow and purple lines. And for every question except one, which I'll get into, the females are farther out, which means that they, again, are just more accepting of what's going on. If you look at the graph, you can see the top one, therapy shame. You can see that that is not anywhere near as far out as the other ones are, and I'll go over that later. So implications of my results. There's going to be three main ones I'm focused on in this presentation. Our societal norms shifting. From the data, pretty much every question I asked, the appropriateness agreed upon was pretty high, even though these questions were based on to kind of push more at the societal norm aspect. Another one was females were more accepting of the perceived stigma than males. I showed in a few graphs that the females were always higher on the percent appropriateness agreed, and even in the societal norm aspect, they were lower as they did not disagree that this went against societal norms. And then based on that last graph that showed about therapy, so we can see that many understand the emotions that are going on in the survey, but they don't know like totally what to do with these emotions. They're not, adolescents aren't familiar with therapy yet. They're not sure what they should do with these feelings they have. Limitations of my survey. This was a really big one, but these questions were formed by my subconscious bias. I was the one who formed these societal norms in the vignettes, so therefore is my interpretation as a male, adolescent male, of what I think societal norms are. The demographic where my data was gathered was in all boys school and in all girls school, both private schools that focus on inclusion and not exclusion. Another big limitation was the terminology in my survey. My first question, or the first statement that I said after my short story was, "It is appropriate for him or her to feel this way." That's positive connotation, followed by "this goes against societal norms," which is negative connotation, which can, as we're dealing with adolescents, this could easily kind of confuse the way I asked. I should have kept them in both positive connotations. And then again, the last limitation, like I said, dealing with adolescents, compared to adults, they're a lot less likely to take the survey seriously and are still kind of figuring out what mental health is, what societal norms are, why they feel stigmas for certain reasons. So further research, I think I should do another adolescent survey the same way I did, but use a preliminary survey to collect examples for the vignettes. So I could do a survey to ask for what societal norms the respondents think instead of doing my own societal norms. And I could just do it kind of just a mix of all. And then I could expand this research into public schools. My percent agreed appropriateness was pretty high. Based on that, I was trying to push societal norms, and I'm interested to see what would happen if I push this to adolescent public schools. And then conduct research on the adult demographic. Adults, they have a lot more life experience. They are more inclined to just have a higher education, and they're more inclined to know kind of the stuff around mental health. And that's it.